If I had a crystal ball and I could look into this crystal ball and tell you guys exactly where your business opportunities lie looking forward, what is working in the future, what is not working in the future, things that we should totally eliminate, things that we should totally start doing in order to see your business grow and flourish. Imagine how amazing that would be. Guys, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have the next best thing. We've recently just launched our opportunity analysis, and the entire premise of this exercise is to help you guys understand where the holes in your bucket currently lie. Why is that important? Because we don't want to start filling a bucket that's leaking. Guys, for a limited time only, I'm going to be offering this as a free giveaway. It's $350, but for you site shedders, you're going to get it for free. You need to head across to tradie.wiki/grow and enter the code SITESHED to get it for nothing. Off the back of it, book a time to have a chat and we'll see where it takes us. We're looking forward to helping you and seeing where your opportunities lie. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Nils Vesk, welcome back to the Site Shed podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us back on, Matt.
Just realised then you're one of, I reckon you'd be up there with one of the most regular guests on this show. You've been, this is the fourth appearance you've had on the Site Shed. You've been back in episode 88 through to 90. We had a series called Innovate Your Business. Episodes 149, 150, we had a little two-part series called Innovative Thinking. And in episode 248, you came back with a single episode called Adapt or Die. It's time to reinvent. And now we're actually here talking about a little series called Reinvent Your Trade Business, which ties into your awesome new book. Well, I'm sure it is awesome. I haven't yet had a chance to read it, but your other ones were great. The new book, which is called The Reinvention Spirit.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually the Reinvention Sprint, but close enough. I like your sentiment there. But yeah, maybe we should rename this the Nils Vesk Tradie Show or something like that.
I should also let the listeners and viewers know I am formerly a plumber and I don't read very well, so don't throw stones. Anyway, mate, welcome back. Great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having us.
You're in Sydney, yeah?
I am today, and we kind of work all around the place. We work in North America, we work throughout Asia, and obviously through Australia and the Pacific.
Might get you to jump in and do a bit of a, let us know a bit about your background, and for the listeners that aren't familiar, especially because I know, your other podcasts certainly got some great feedback, and I still go back to a lot of those frameworks that we discussed in that innovative thinking series that we did, just to sort of. It almost helps me cast a fresh set of eyes on my own stuff sometimes, like I sort of try and look at it with an outside of the box a bit.
Well, that's part of the strategy.
Right.
And, so I run a business called Ideas with Legs. And essentially what we do is we work with all kinds of companies, from your small startups to some of your Fortune 500 companies to even have worked with tradies before. And one of the things that we try and help them to do is to look at their business in a way that they can grow, but not just grow because they've got to put in more money or more effort, but innovative ways that they can grow. And what I'd love to share with you guys today is some content and some strategies that we've been using with our clients for quite some time with some great results, which is around helping people reinvent their business results. And and I guess, when people say, what do we do that's a bit different? It's kind of like, how can you see your business with fresh eyes so that you can find the most critical parts that you can reinvent or improve, and you can do it at minimal risk and minimal cost to get the maximum reward. And that's kind of what we're about.
I guess we haven't really spoken since this whole coronavirus pandemic thing's kicked off. It's probably, the last time you would have been on the show It would have been before.
Pre-corona.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe just, to be honest. But what was it, back in May 2020? So it might have just been. I've got a feeling at that time as well, we were sort of talking to businesses about how they need to adapt and how they need to make change. That was episode 248. But I suppose between now and then, I've also seen some really significant shifts in the space we're going to be talking about. So I think I could probably bring quite a few observations of my own to this conversation. And for the better, I might add. On top of all of this, coronavirus, from my perspective, like running a digital marketing agency for tradespeople over at Tradie Web Guys, we do a lot in the space of advertising and running ads and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things I've been banging on for years and years, like well and truly before coronavirus was ever on the radar, was that whole churn and burn mentality that that business owners have when it comes to lead generation. And that mentality often comes at the cost, it comes at the expense of their existing customers. And instead of sort of applying focus to re-engaging and, serving that customer better, they often just think the answer is to get more leads. And we've sort of seen a real big shift in that space right now, which is it's almost been forced on them. And then to add on top of this reality, there's been things like Apple iOS update, which is taking away retargeting, on social platforms and all these kind of things, which again has put the power. It sounds all doom and gloomy, but it's actually been a really good thing for business owners because it's put the power back in their hands and it's taken them off these conglomerates like Facebook and Google, and it's put them a bit more back in control, which I think is fantastic. So like this whole reinvention thing, it's something that I've seen a lot of businesses, and we've been helping a lot of businesses really lately, really do quite well, because it's in truth, it's not that it's any more difficult than what they are already doing. It's just a paradigm in their thinking, and it's taking a slightly different angle. And like you said before, it's looking at something through a different lens and seeing how can you do something a little bit differently in order to achieve either the better or even maybe the same result, but just doing something a little bit different,
And I guess one of the things that we always get our clients to do when they're starting and they say, look, our business results aren't as good as they want. We want them up there, but they're about there and there's a gap. How do we get through that? The first thing we always get people to do is get clear about refocusing. And it's interesting when, while marketing is one area, and I would say that's how we sell what we do, there are really kind of 4 simple, basic ways to think about your business. How you go about building, how you go about your processes, how you go about selling, and how you go about delivering. And so when we look at with a client around what their business might be, we say, well, look, let's, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel you're going with your marketing and selling your stuff? Like, it's great. Okay. Well, look, let's look at how your processes are, or let's look about how you actually go out there and build things. Or actually, let's go about how we're actually going to deliver those different areas. So thinking about those 4 areas is really good, because sometimes people think, we're already doing our Google and Facebook advertising. We've got our marketing down well. We've got a good lead generation sort of capture device, but the reality is we're not getting the results that we want to do. It's like, okay, well, what might that be? It's really interesting. I remember working with one, actually, I was a very successful commercial plumber in Sydney, where the biggest challenge, he didn't have a problem of the shortage of work. It was around his processes of being able to recruit the right type of apprentices who wanted to stay with him and not sort of then go off and set up their own business. So it was more about helping him have processes around, when someone comes in, what his quotation processes were, what his delivery process was. It just, it freed up so much time. And, I could probably say he had more gray hair when he started and then ended up with less after it, just because we helped to reinvent his processes. But it's amazing how that would be my first tip to start with is like, do you want to reinvent how you go about building what you do? Do you want to reinvent how your processes are, how you go about selling, or how you go about delivering it? And a really, really simple technique that works. And we use this with giant companies as well as just a small little business, like whether you're a little tradie or a single operator, is to think of those 4 different areas. So what I'd encourage you to do is think of almost like grab a piece of paper if you wanted to, and you could kind of hold it up and think of just drawing 4 or 3 lines. So you've got 4 columns. So you've got build, sell, process, and deliver. And then across those areas, what you want to think of is, what do we need to stop doing? What should we continue to do? And what do we need to start doing? Because a lot of people think, right, I'm going to go out and start this new tactic in some Facebook advertising, or I'm going to do this new tactic and reinvent all of our processes. But usually you can't do something new unless you stop something and replace something. And the reality is, we probably wouldn't be listening to this show unless we're doing some good things already. So what are those things that we continue? And as simple as that sounds, just make it real basic. What do we need to stop doing? And just asking yourself, okay, what processes that are we using at the moment that we've got to stop? We're doing a text, just a simple text quotation. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe it's not. Maybe we need to stop that. What should we continue? Well, actually, our referral fee basis works really well. Maybe we should continue that. What do we need to start doing? You know what? We haven't actually documented anything in how we go about doing something, so that, if I'm sick or I need to get a locum in or another tradie to take my spot, how are they going to do what they do? So that's probably one of the clearest, simple spaces that we can start is, what do we need to stop? What should we continue? And what can we start? It's not rocket science. And yet I use this technique with literally, some of the smartest people on the planet and R&D labs throughout North America. But it works because it is simple. And sometimes we overcomplicate things.
There's and I'm not sure if you know this already, but there's a book called Good Authority, which I've just read, and there's a framework in there which is called the Stop, Start, Keep.
Okay, there we go.
And we've rolled this out in our organization. So we have like a quarterly meeting cadence, which we call our quarterly flight plan, where basically we set our strategic goals for the next 3 months. We do that, 4 times a year. And it's actually coming up this Friday. And 2 weeks before this meeting, there's an automatic email that goes out to our entire team, and it's the Stop, Start, Keep survey, where they basically get input into what we should be stopping, what we should be starting doing, and what we should keep doing. And it's really interesting because it sort of fuels a lot of the trajectory for the business, and it gives me as a business owner insight as to things that they might be currently doing, which they feel is not in their best interest, or thing. Because you know what it's like. Very often you get all these things happen within the business, and sometimes you might just go dump something on someone, and it's really not what they should be doing. So when we tie the Stop, Start, Keep into setting our quarterly rocks and setting our quarterly trajections, it just clears things up, because then along that track of that 3 months, if something does pop up and I'm like, hey, go do this, or if they're like, oh, we need to work on this, we can always pull it back to that point of reference, as our North Star, and say, no, this is what we're working towards. Let's stick that in the pipeline for the next 3 months if we need to, or we can either just get rid of it altogether if we don't think it's necessary at that point. But the point is focus, and it's like trying to stay on target. Otherwise, you just end up on these tangents and you end up all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure we've all been there where we go, oh, this looks like nice and shiny. Let's go and have a go at that. And you sort of throw some dough at it and put some effort into it. And something that's really, really helped my focus and helped my clients amazingly well was a question that actually is basically the premise of a whole book. American guy by the name of Gary Keller, and he's a real estate magnate that has just giant realtor businesses throughout North America. And he wrote a book, I think it might be called something like The One Thing. I'm not sure exactly, but it is the one thing. Yeah. And he has that simple question, which is, what's the number one thing that we need to focus on such that everything else becomes either irrelevant or easier to do? Mm-hmm. And just asking that one question, having that focus, just really enables you when you're looking at your day or your week ahead, what you should be focusing on. Incidentally, a lot of cognitive psychologists and organizational psychologists have worked out that we work better planning for weeks. So when you plan, it's better to plan for the week than for the day, because we tend to overreach with what we think we can do within a day, but we underestimate what we can do over years. So it's much better to think in weeks. So for this week, this is my plan, and then ask that question. And I've kind of, for our clients, we often have modified that type of question. Say, what's the number one thing that we've got to focus on in order to reinvent? So is it X, Y, and Z? And sometimes I'll just use the one question. If I get too excited about, writing a new book or something, I'll say, I'll ask myself, what's the number one thing I need to focus on that is profit generating, because otherwise I'll work on some back of the house stuff, which may not necessarily be, something I want to do. So depending on what your focus is, your priority, what's the number one thing that I've got to focus on such that everything else is irrelevant or easier to do.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I mean, I know like the last 3 months, I've been focusing a lot within my business on structure, process, and just setting it up to scale. We've had a whole new bunch of hires come in. We've had a whole bunch of products that we've been refining and improving, and that has come at the cost of focusing on sales. But we know that we had to do this first because my worst nightmare would be to pull the trigger on a product launch and try to sell something that wasn't ready. And so then the next 3 months, the focus is going to be back on, generating more traffic, building out our sales team, building out our sales pipeline, our sales department, all that kind of stuff. So it's as my coach says, it's time to stop navel gazing. Now we need to get out there and start growing the business again. So
yeah, and sorry, another way to think about this, and I'll probably talk about this in another episode, is around the concept of bottlenecks. And, we all know what a bottleneck is. It's something that it's all got to funnel through, and it takes up time. It causes frustration for us, for our customers. And if you just ask yourself, what are the biggest bottlenecks that are happening in my business? Is it quotation processes? I mean, that's such a pain in the ass for so many people, and also such a time waster, which leads to another question, which we can talk about when we talk about reinvention marketing, which is, who's your ideal customer? Do you actually want to work with people that are sort of kicking your tires? Wouldn't it be better if, you're not actually having to do a quotation, what you're going to be writing down is actually going to be, taken on board. But so you can ask, what are the bottlenecks in how we go about building, bottlenecks in our processes, bottlenecks in how we sell and how we deliver. But coming back to this one plumber that we were working with, one of the biggest bottlenecks he had was basically having a script in selling his business when he was with a client, because he sort of thought, I know what to say, but we thought, well, if you have a script, it's just going to make life easier because you don't have to think about what to say. You can just sort of insert the blanks. And that one little process sort of freed up about, 20 minutes of his thinking time before he would make the call, because he could just pull it up on his phone and just go, "G'day, it's Matt, blah, blah, blah," and just riff it through there. But the best thing is it then enabled him to leverage it. So he could then get his receptionist to start making sales rather than him having to be on the call, because she could ask questions that were based on those different things there. But what are the bottlenecks? That's just a really good way to think about how you can start to fix up and reinvent your business.
So in this series, which we've called Reinvent Your Trade Business, there's 3 episodes. The first part is going to be is about refocus and reset your mindset. The second part is going to be reinvent how you deliver what the customer really wants. And the third one is going to be rapidly reinvent your marketing. So obviously for you guys out there right now, you're tuning into the first episode. So we will talk about refocus and reset your mindset. I guess we've already scratched the surface on that already. But I suppose to give the listeners a bit of insight, does this tie into, sort of that strategic conversation and, being able to map out, like you just said, where the bottlenecks are and, like what is mindset really? Like, I think a lot of people just think it's some, rainbow and unicorns term that business coaches use. But I'd love to dive a little bit deeper on this.
Yeah. I think mindset is underrated, both underrated and sometimes not overrated, but misunderstood. So as you said, some people think, we've got to sit around and go hoo-ha and we can make this happen. But, the reality is your behaviors, that is the things that you do in your business, how you sell, the work that you do is all affected by your thoughts. So if you're thinking, negative things, if you're thinking all of the reasons why you can't grow your business, if you're thinking all of the reasons why you'll never be able to, leverage, or you'll never have time off because you've always got to be on the phone, then, you start to behave that way. Even if you're not consciously doing, unconsciously you can start to do that. So that's one of the reasons why getting the thinking is so critical for high performance. If we look at whether it's a high performance sports person, whether it's a high performance performer on a stage, whether it's a high performance trader in the stock market in America, New York, they're all using a certain mindset that enables to do that. And I've invested heavily in all kinds of different, mindset and psychology, different studies in the past. But one of my most recent ones was actually in high performance sports psychology. And my chosen sport is hang gliding. That means I basically have a giant kite strapped to my neck and my back, and I jump off a cliff, and we try and get around the course as fast as possible. Might try and fly 200 kilometers. And, so it's a very risky, very dangerous sport. And at my most recent world championships that I went to a couple of years ago, I was quite nervous because I had a child that was going to be born a few weeks after I got back. So I'm thinking, hopefully it doesn't come early, like has it just happened for Matt. But my wife said, no, go and do it. But I spent a lot of time really trying to use some more high performance psychology. I went and saw a high performance sports psychologist. And even though I've been, studying quasi psychology for probably 20 years or so, I went out with a psychologist with a master's degree for 8 years, and then she dumped me. So I've been in therapy ever since then. But seriously, that I learned so much stuff over the years. And when you really think about business, it's probably about 80% of it is around, mindset. And 20% then is just acting on having that right approach. So whether it's doing the right thing, whether it's saying no to the things you shouldn't be doing, whether it's about be able to persist past the uncomfortable stuff, that's what it can do. So that's my kind of approach to mindset.
So let's unpack this a bit, because I don't want the listeners or the viewers out there to think this is one of those, what's that book, they talk about how you can magically wish things. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep. Intention. Yeah. No, it's not that. Yeah. Think it and you can dream it and it will happen.
Yeah. And so many people took that the wrong way and didn't take it for what the actual book was meant to be. But I think, fundamentally, in my experience, the conversation around mindset is so relevant and important, because until you've got the right mindset, you're not in a position, or you don't have the capacity within yourself in order to take on new information, or to be teachable, or to be coachable, or whatever that might be. That might even be just sitting there reading a book or whatever it is. But if you don't have the right mindset at that point in time, then you're very unlikely to absorb it, which means you're very unlikely to practically apply what you've learned from that book. Now, this is one of the reasons I read a lot, because it keeps me in a studious mindset, and I'm always looking for new ways of doing things. And if I'm honest with you, it's only been the last couple of years that I've really been able to make that leap from becoming a student into becoming an implementer. And lately, I've really been prolifically implementing everything I've been reading. Well, not everything, but actively going out and looking for answers to questions that I've got, so that I can improve, whatever it might be within my personal life and my business, so that I can, make significant shifts in the way that we operate, the way that I operate, the way my team operates, or the way the business functions, or whatever it might be. So that was kind of a frustrating observation and reality for me, because I've spent so many years and I've read so many amazing books. And if I'm honest, I haven't taken from them what I probably should have. And I'm probably going to have to go back and reread a lot of these so that I can actually attack it now with the mindset that I have, which is, how can I extract something from this that I can apply? Because I was in that information paralysis, sort of approach, where I would just read so much, and then I just finish one book and pick up the next one, and I would just forget about what I've read, and I'd go on to the next thing, and blah, blah, blah. And with the podcast, we have all these authors that come on the show, like yourself, and I haven't read the books. I'm like, I've got to read the book before they come on the show, which makes me forget the book I've just read, and then I just end up spiraling out of, down this rabbit warren. So I think, to put a bit of perspective out there for the listeners and viewers out there, from my point of view, mindset is really about, sure, you've got to understanding that you can, or what it is that you want to achieve. So the difference between, a hope and a wish is a strategy, basically, or what's that saying? The difference between a goal and a wish is a strategy, or whatever. But the point being, you can, if you want to achieve something, you have to, first of all, get some clarity around what it is that you want to achieve, which is the goal. And then you've got to design a strategy which can help you achieve that goal. And once you have that, it really makes you develop a really strong belief. You can positively affirm that you can achieve these once you understand how few things you actually need to do in order to reach these bigger goals. And you touched on it a little bit before, we're designed to work towards an ideal week. And sometimes, we might pile too many things on our plate. But the reason why we do quarterly, we have these quarterly rocks within the business is because we know if we can give it, if each of my team member has 3 main things they have to focus on over the course of the next 3 months, we know that doesn't overcomplicate them. And we know that doesn't they don't get too bogged down with, all this stuff they have to do. They nearly always get done. They don't always get done, but they nearly always get done. And we try to shoot for, a 70% success rate with these quarterly rocks, because if we're hitting everything, we're not striving enough. But if we're, if we're not hitting anything, then we're either not doing the work properly, or we haven't got the frameworks down.
If I can share with you a technique, again, this is evidence-based, a technique that can work with this. One of the biggest challenges that we have in business is that we set ourselves big goals. It's ambitious. We go, right, I want to create a business where we've got, 4 or 5 guys working with me, and, we've got, 2 admin team that are doing X, Y, and Z, which is great. That's what we call an outcome goal. But the reality is, in order to achieve an outcome goal, we need to have a certain number of process goals. Yep. And so one of the things that I'll do, and we do with our clients, is say, okay, so our outcome goal is to generate, $1.2 million in income in the next 6 months, whatever it might be. And then what we do is we go, okay, that's clear, it's specific by whatever date it is. And then we go, okay, so what processes, this is the actions that we have to do each week in order to do that. And you can break it down even further. So you could say, what are the daily activities that we need to do? Mm-hmm. What are the weekly? What are the monthly? What are the quarterly? And what are the one-offs? And so by breaking your goal down that way, what it means is yes, you're aware of you like to use the word North Point. That is, we want to create this $1.2 million in 6 months revenue type thing, but we're looking at what are those processes that we need to do. So the processes might be, each week we do a blog on 7 ways to keep your plumbing pipes cleaner than ever before, or whatever it might be. A one-off might be to create a people magnet, or what some people call a lead magnet. Another one might be to follow up with previous clients. That might be once a month where we do that. So having those things down really works well. And if you want to take it to the next level, and this is what high performance psychologists will do with you, is they'll say, what is the performance goals that you've got? So how do you want to feel when you're doing this? So if we structure them again, so you've got your outcome goal at the top, then we've got our process goals, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and one-offs, and then we've got our performance goals. How do we want to feel when we're actually in the activities doing them themselves? And that is just why this is so important, is that, let's say our goal is to do 1.2 million, and that's the only goal we've got documented. We get to 6 months and we've done 800K, you know what? And we could just beat ourselves up going, oh man, I'm a loser. I should give up and become a baker or something instead of being, it's a different trade, but it'll be easier than laying pipes or building bricks or building houses. But if we've got our process goals and we can look over them and go, you know what? I did this, I did that, I did that. It's not about me. There's not a personal flaw. It's a process flaw. And that's a really important thing to think about. In psychology, we'll say that if something's not working, it's not you that's something wrong with you. It's the processes and the behavior designs that you've got that are flawed, and we just need to fix them.
Sure. And it's a refreshing revelation when you can break down a bigger picture goal or a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. And you can actually see, well, if you bust it down into annual goals, if you bust that down into quarterly goals, and if you break that down into monthly goals and weekly tasks or daily tasks or whatever it is, it's really quite refreshing and inspiring to realize that you don't have to do a whole lot in order to achieve that goal. It's just like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? It's the small, consistent things that you do, over and over again, which really do add up to that bigger picture. I know Arnold Schwarzenegger was famous for, one of the things he's famous for is his 1% rule. Always just try and be 1% improvement across everything you're doing. And that's something that I applied at the beginning of the year. And I took that mentality into business and into health and into a few other things. And it really forces a bit of a habit of change on you, and it's really made a big difference. There's another really great book which you've probably read called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's an amazing book. Definitely one of my top 10 books of all time.
I would give you another book that tops that. That's the real science. Yeah. So it's called Tiny Habits, and it's by a guy called Dr. BJ Fogg. So this is, without dissing Atomic Habits, it's kind of like, so one is written by someone who's not a behavioral scientist, whereas this one is. And yeah, so this guy was, BJ Fogg was one of the minds who's taught, Instagram. That was one of his students. So one of the things that he teaches people is how to create behaviors. And his whole concept is about, as you said, like atomic habits, is tiny habits lead to big results. And he has an amazing formula that is a behavior equals MAP, B equals MAP. So B equals map, and behavior equals motivation, ability, and prompt. So the reality is, if something is difficult for us to do, it's usually the easiest place that we can do is to look at changing the ability. So doing a small chunk of it rather than having to do a whole chunk. So let's say you suck at marketing. A lot of people do, let's be honest about it. And the reason why they often suck is they try and, bite off the elephant in one big chunk. But if you said, let's make it easier. And so what we're going to do is we're going to spend 5 minutes a day doing a social post. That's it. No more. And keeping it at that smallest thing makes it more achievable, and then makes us be able to make it happen. The biggest problem that we have is we put too much reliance on M. That's the motivation. So what happens is motivation's fickle. It's like, it's like your unreliable friend, the person that you don't want to go and pick you up from the airport. Where's Matt? Oh God, is down the beach. So you want to have, so motivation is going to go up and down. Like, you can start your day pumped up, and by the end of the day, you're going, oh God, I hate my job. Your motivation's gone down. So what you need to do is go, okay, motivation's going to go up and down. I can control the ability, that is either making it easier or shorter to do. The other thing I can control is the prompts. So things that remind me when to do. And the best way that we can get habits is to actually anchor it to an existing activity. So I've got a habit, which is after I flip open the laptop and turn it on, I pull out a compliment slip. Now, this is old school, but what I then do is I go, oh, who haven't I spoken to for a while? I go, hey, Matt, thanks so much for having us on your podcast. And I do that. So just that one little business development tiny habit can create some amazing traction. So anchor it to an existing task that you do. So it might be after I get off the phone, I do X. Or after I get in the ute, or in the car, and the truck, I do, X, Y, and Z. Or after I leave the customer or the client's house, I do X, Y, and Z. And doing those little things can really help to create some great traction. So as you said, chew the elephant one little bit at a time, but know what those pieces are.
Yeah, I think they in Atomic Habits they call that habit stacking or something. I think it was in that. You know what? Again, take a prime example of reading too many books and not knowing which ones came from what. But I think that's what they call that habit stacking, and it alludes to how you can improve or you can add on to things, or even if you're doing things that you know is not in your best interest, in order to do that, if you can make a habit out of doing something good that ties into that. So, for example, I know I shouldn't watch too much television. I should be doing exercise. Okay, well, every time I turn the TV on, I need to do like 50 sit-ups or something like that. And you sort of, you habit stacking, you're tying something positive into something that's perhaps not as positive. But,
and if there's other things that you want to stop doing or reduce them, is you make the prompt harder. So let's say, for example, if you find like you're eating too much fat food and sweet food, well, it's like, well, put it somewhere it's harder to get. You're watching too much television, put it somewhere else there. And it's amazing what you can do with it. A really cool technique that I use with our clients as well as myself, at the end of the day, is just ask yourself these things, and you go, out of a score of 10, how have you been going tactically? How have you been going technically? How have you gone mentally? And how have you gone logistically? So I'll take you through those ones. So tactically is, how have you been going with the decisions of what to focus on and what you should be doing? So at the end of the day, you can go, okay, well, give myself a a 7 or a 10. How have you been going technically? So how well have you been executing those decisions that you've been making throughout the day and doing those different things? Mentally, how are you handling it? You know, are you sort of, have you been losing your focus? Have you been on focus on the ball? You know, score yourself out of 10 in that one. And then finally, logistically, how have you been going with your time management around getting things done out at a certain time there? And by just doing that little thing, what it does is it takes the self-talk or the subconscious, unconscious assessment stuff. We're going, oh, mate, you suck at this, or like, I hate this job, and it goes, okay, well, it looks like I've got a low score around this tactical component. So it means that I'm not being clear enough about what decisions I need to make. So let me get a little bit more focused about this tomorrow. If doing this daily is too much, do it once a week, but it only takes you, like literally 60 seconds or so to do, but it enables you to really focus on, okay, I need to get a bit clearer about making the decisions that I do. And I use this really well because it just takes out the what we call negative self-talk, or we just are our worst bosses. You know, if you had to work for your mind, you'd leave within 5 minutes, literally. It's like, are you fucking you'd be charged. You'd be in jail. You'd be up for harassment, for bullying, for abuse. Probably it's just amazing. So it really helps to get away from that self-defeating thinking, and it goes, okay, I can see it now, and I can do something about it.
So why don't we, before we wrap this episode up, let's maybe talk about, okay, for all listeners and viewers out there, what's the first thing they should be doing in relation to resetting their mindset?
The first one I would do is to create two, what I call buckets. One is a work bucket and one is a personal bucket. So grab a piece of paper or on your phone and just go list everything, whatever is on your mind, because usually there's a lot of stuff going on. I did this one just last week, and my wife went, "Oh, what's that?" I said, "Oh, that's my buckets." And it was, so you just literally list whatever's in your mind about work. It could be, got to do this, create a new landing page, or I've got to get a new logo for the truck. Whatever those things are, just list out as many as you can. And then once you've done that, go on to the other column and call it personal, whatever you want, and just list everything that's going down in your mind that way as well. When you've got them out, you're going to feel a bit better, because it's like you've had a brain dump. Oh, God, finally got there. Excellent. Okay, I can do something about it now. And then what you want to do is to ask yourself, remember that, come back to that question, what's the number one thing I need to focus on such that everything else becomes easier or irrelevant to do? And you can go back through that list and kind of number them numerically if you wanted to do, or just, use a highlighter or a pen and go, okay, here's my top 5 things I've really got to kind of focus on. And, there was a quality expert, Denning, I can't remember his first name, Dr. Denning. He was kind of responsible for making Japan, the high quality, why made in Japan became the best stuff in the world. And his kind of focus is that if you actually get the first 15% of a process nailed, the rest becomes easier. So just focus on that first part and get that through, and go, okay, look, I'm not going to be able to get to everything here, but if I'm focusing on the most important stuff, the rest of the stuff will happen. It's about focusing on those things. So I would say do the buckets and then go ask yourself that question. And if you wanted to go a bit further, you could, if you're not sure about what's not working, then you could go and ask yourself that question around, what do we need to focus on in terms of, building? Is there a bottleneck around what we're building? Our processes, is there a bottleneck around how we sell, or is there bottlenecks around how we deliver? And then that can give you some clarity around what you need to focus on. So those things will really help around that. The last thing that I think would be really useful to do, and this sounds a little bit weird, is the concept of what they call acceptance commitment therapy, or ACT for short. And by nature, for whatever reason, people think that if we need to get better focus, that we need to have a chat with ourselves and, go, no, I can do this, Nils, I can do this. And don't worry about those thoughts. They're not right. The reality is, if you give too much attention to your self-talk, you end up listening to it too much. And it's kind of like you're driving a truck, and then you go, what's that noise up the back? Oh, it's my mind. And you kind of look over your shoulder, and before you know it, no one's driving the truck because you're arguing with yourself. So the concept of what they call acceptance commitment therapy is, which is a technique used in psychology, is acceptance. So rather than try and argue or debate your thinking. It's just to accept what your thoughts might be. So go, right now, I'm having the thoughts of blah, 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 that I'm not a good tradie, that I'm never going to get past working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. I suck at what I do, and I don't like these thoughts and feelings. I don't want these thoughts and feelings, but I have them and I've got room for them. So just by saying, I don't like these thoughts and feelings, I don't want these thoughts and feelings, but I've got room for them. Just by doing that, it just takes off probably about 20% of that stress that enables you to focus on the activity that you've got to do, which is really important because, when we've got to get stuff done, we can't afford to be, wasting our time. So that would be the first thing to do, just to do that. If you've got some thoughts that are going really, really crazy, you can do a technique which is a bit radical where you use a tune. So, for example, Happy Birthday, and you put the lyrics of your head into the tune because we all know the tune Happy Birthday. So let's say, for example, I'm a crappy tradesman. I'm the worst contractor. I'm never going to retire because I'm always going to be working, And as weird as that sounds, what it does is it desensitizes, and it's called cognitive diffusion. It takes out the volatility that power. And it's like, they're just thoughts, because thoughts aren't necessarily facts. Most of the time, the thinking that we have that's stopping us are not facts. They're just something that we've made up. And that technique has worked. The first time I used that technique really powerfully, I was in Austria competing in the Dutch national championships, and I was at 6,000 feet. It started snowing. I was like, oh my God, I've never flown in the Alps before. It started snowing. I thought, am I going to die? And I just started singing, I think I'm going to die. I think, but literally, and I ended up winning that competition. That was my first ever international hang gliding competition I'd ever won. But yeah, so there's some simple ways that you can clear some space.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully we'll make that part of the intro. I think that's very funny. And just to stem on from that, I suppose that's a process that's helped me define where my time is best spent within my business, perhaps not to that degree, but indirectly, which ties into the whole conversation around processes and systems. Like I've been able to sort of, look at that and say, well, this is what I don't like doing, and this is what I'm not good at doing, and this is what I need to build processes around so that I can find somebody that can come and do this better than I can do, and basically remove me from part of that equation. That's something that I'm doing a lot at the moment. And as business owners, as your businesses grow, you will have to do that. You can't do everything on your own. You have to inevitably and eventually palm things off to other people. That if you're honest, as soon as you let go of your ego, you realize these people are going to do this so much better than me. Like I know I suck at this, yet I'm hanging on to it for pride more than anything. And it's sort of a similar mindset to what I've used to help me, get past those things.
Yeah, definitely.
Nils, that's been great. Let's come back. We're going to talk in the following episode, reinvent how you deliver what the customer really wants. So I'm sure in this episode, we're going to be able to unpack what I would consider some really good questions that we should need to be answering when it comes to how we communicate and how we market our business. Something that I see a pretty common flaw across the board. Mate, thanks very much for joining us again.
Thanks for having us.
Neil, your website is ideaswithlegs.com. And if you go to /reinvention-check, there's a little checklist there, isn't there, for you listeners and viewers out there. I'll have some links to all this, guys, in the show notes. So don't try and write this down while you're driving. And hopefully you're not watching this while you're driving, but I'm sure a lot of you guys are listening to this. So head across to the show notes over at thesiteshed.com, and you will get access to all of these links. And again, if you like what you've heard here in this podcast, you can go and check out Nils's other episodes. Again, that was first series, episode 88 through to 90, which was Innovate Your Business, episode 149 and 150, which was Innovative Thinking. And then in 248, we had a single episode, which was Adapt or Die. It's time to reinvent. Nils, thanks, mate. We're going to come back with part 2 of this series, and we are going to explore some of these other wonderful areas of reinventing our trade business. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.